Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we continue reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. We are at the introduction. We have been reading about Lord Chaitanya and his pastimes. We're going to continue reading from the introduction. Would somebody like to read?
Can I read?
Please.
This is the specific kindness of Lord Chaitanya. In this age, no one can say that he is free from sin. It is impossible for anyone to say this. But Lord Chaitanya accepts all kinds of sinful persons on the one condition that they promise not to indulge in sinful habits after being spiritually initiated by the bona fide spiritual master.
So, we are all sinful in this age of Kali. And Lord Chaitanya, he is very kind. He's come to deliver each and every one of us. So he accepts everyone. And Prabhupada is saying, just he accepts everyone. And like the initiation vows, that one will stop committing the sinful activities. No meat eating, no gambling, no illicit sex, no intoxication.
There are a number of instructive points to be observed in this incident of the two brothers. In this Kali Yuga, practically all people are of the equality of Jagai and Madai if they want to be relieved from the reactions of their misdeeds. They must take shelter of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and after spiritual initiation, thus refrain from those things which are prohibited in the Shastras. The prohibitory rules are dealt with in the Lord's teachings to Srila Rupa Goswami. During his householder's life, the Lord did not display many of the miracles which are generally expected from such personalities, but he did once perform a wonderful miracle in the house of Srinivasa Thakur. While Sankirtana was in full swing, he asked the devotees what they wanted to eat, and when he was informed that they wanted to eat mangoes, he asked for a seed of a mango, although this fruit was out of season. When the seed was brought to him, he sowed it in the yard of Srinivasa, and once a creeper began to grow out of the seed, within no time this creeper became a full-grown mango tree, heavy with more ripened fruits than the devotees could eat. The tree remained in Srinivasa's yard, and from then on the devotees used to take as many mangoes from the tree as they wanted. The Lord had a very high estimation of the affections of the damsels of Vrajabhumi, Vrindavan, for Krishna, and in appreciation of their unalloyed service to the Lord, once Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu chanted the holy names of the gopis, cowherd girls, instead of the names of the Lord. At this time, some of his students who were also disciples came to see him, and when they saw that the Lord was chanting the names of the gopis, they were astonished. Out of sheer foolishness, they asked the Lord why he was chanting the names of the gopis and advised him to chant the name of Krishna. The Lord was in ecstasy, was thus disturbed by these foolish students. He chastised them and chased them away. The students were almost the same age as the Lord, and thus they wrongly thought of the Lord as one of their peers. They held a meeting and resolved that they would attack the Lord if he dared to punish them again in such a manner. This incident provoked some malicious talks about the Lord on the part of the general public. When the Lord became aware of this, he began to consider the various types of men found in society. He noted that especially the students, professors, fruitive workers, yogis, non-devotees, and different types of atheists were all opposed to the devotional service of the Lord. My mission is to deliver all the fallen souls of this age, he thought. But if they commit offenses against me, thinking me to be an ordinary man, they will not benefit. If they are to begin their life of spiritual realization, they must some way or another offer obeisances unto me. Thus the Lord decided to accept the renounced order of life, sannyas, because people in general were inclined to offer respects to a sannyasi.
The Lord, he was a householder, no? He was a married man and he was totally absorbed in ecstasy, always chanting the holy names of the Lord, always doing Sankirtan, especially in the house of Srivas Thakur. And he was a teacher. He was a teacher of Sanskrit. So he was also teaching the students um, the grammar in relation to the Lord's names, Krishna's names. So one time he was in ecstasy and he was chanting the name of the gopis. So his students told him, "Hey, what, you've gone mad? You're chanting the name of the gopis. You should chant the name of Krishna." So, that made Lord Chaitanya realize that, oh, if people commit offenses against him, then how will they begin their spiritual life? His mission, as he said, Lord Chaitanya comes to deliver all of us. He's come to give us the Yuga Dharma, the Harinam Sankirtan. So he said, if people are gonna be against me, then they will not make any spiritual advancement. And that's why he took sannyas, just so that somehow the other people will show respect to him, will offer obeisances to him. Because in those days, people would really respect a sannyasi 500 years ago. And so Krishna says, offer obeisances to me, you know, anyone offering obeisances to Krishna begins his devotional service. So for this reason, Lord Chaitanya took sannyas for us to do good to us.
500 years ago, the condition of society was not as degraded as it is today. At that time, people would show respects to a sannyasi, and the sannyasi was rigid in following the rules and regulations of the renounced order of life. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was not very much in favor of the renounced order of life in this age of Kali, but that was only for the reason that very few sannyasis in this age are able to observe the rules and regulations of sannyasa life. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu decided to accept the order and become an ideal sannyasi so that the general populace would show him respect. One is duty bound to show respect to a sannyasi, and for a sannyasi is considered to be the master of all the varnas and ashramas. While he was contemplating accepting the sannyas order, it so happened that Keshava Bharati, a sannyasi of Mayavadi school and resident of Katwa in Bengal, visited Navadvipa and was invited to dine with the Lord. When Keshava Bharati came to his house, the Lord asked him to award him the sannyas order of life. This was a matter of formality. The sannyas order is to be accepted from another sannyasi. Although the Lord was independent in all respects, still to keep up the formalities of the Shastras, he accepted the sannyas order from Keshava Bharati. Although Keshava Bharati was not in Vaishnava Sampradaya school.
So the sannyas initiation has to be taken from another sannyasi. So when Keshav Bharati came, Lord Chaitanya, he asked him, "Can you please give me sannyas?" Although Lord Chaitanya is Krishna himself, he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. He doesn't need to take sannyas. But just for the people at that time, so they could show him respect. That's the reason he took. And Keshav Bharati is not also in a Vaishnav Sampradaya. He's coming from the Shankara Sampradaya, in the line of the Shankaracharya. But Lord Chaitanya took sannyas in that line.
After consulting with Keshava Bharati, the Lord left Navadvipa for Katwa to formally accept the sannyas order of life. He was accompanied by Srila Nityanand Prabhu, Chandrasekhar Acharya, and Mukunda Datta. These three assisted him in the details of the ceremony. The incident of the Lord's accepting the sannyas order is very elaborately described in the Caitaniya Bhagavatam by Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur. Thus, at the end of his 24th year, the Lord accepted the sannyas order of life in the month of Magha. After accepting this order, he became a full-fledged preacher of the Bhagavad Dharma. Although he was doing the same preaching work in his householder life, when he experienced some obstacles to his preaching, he sacrificed even the comfort of his home life for the sake of the fallen souls. In his householder life, his chief assistant was Srila Advaita Prabhu and Srila Srivasa Thakur. But after he accepted the sannyas order, his chief assistants became Srila Nityananda Prabhu, who was deputed to preach specifically in Bengal, and the six Goswamis, Rupa Goswami, Sanatan Goswami, Jiva Goswami, Gopala Bhatta Goswami, Raghunath Das Goswami, and Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, headed by Srila Rupa and Sanatan, who were deputed to go to Vrindavan to excavate the present places of pilgrimage. The present city of Vrindavan and the importance of Rajabhumi were thus disclosed by the will of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
So before sannyas, Lord Chaitanya's main main people who would support him in the Sankirtana movement was Advaita Acharya and Srivas Thakur. They were both householders, family people. But after he took sannyas, he went to Jagannath Puri, and that time it was Lord Nityananda Prabhu. Lord Nityananda Prabhu was sent by Lord Chaitanya to preach in Bengal, and the six Goswamis of Vrindavan. The six Goswamis of Vrindavan were sent by Lord Chaitanya to Vrindavan to write the Bhakti Shastras, to write the books on devotional service, and to excavate the places of the pastimes of Lord Krishna. Because many of the places had become covered. Radha Kund, Sham Kund had gotten covered. Lord Chaitanya, he found when he went to Vrindavan, he said that this is the place of Radha Kund, Sham Kund. But to develop those areas, he sent the six Goswamis, and to build the temples also, he sent the Goswamis. Because the places had become covered of Lord Krishna's pastimes. So this was 500 years ago.
The Lord, after accepting the sannyas order, at once wanted to start for Vrindavan. For 3 continuous days, he traveled in the Radha Desha, places where the Ganges does not flow. He was in full ecstasy over the idea of going to Vrindavan. However, Srila Nityanand diverted his path and brought him instead to the house of Advaita Prabhu in Shantipura. The Lord stayed at Sri Advaita Prabhu's house for a few days, and knowing well that the Lord was leaving his hearth and home for good, Sri Advaita Prabhu sent his men to Navadvipa to bring Mother Shachi to have a last meeting with her son. Some unscrupulous people say that Lord Chaitanya met his wife also after taking sannyas and offered her his wooden slipper for worship. But the authentic sources give no information about such a meeting. His mother met him at the house of Advaita Prabhu, and when she saw her son in sannyas dress, she lamented. By way of compromise, she requested her son to make his headquarters in Puri, so that she would easily be able to get information about him. The Lord granted this last desire of his beloved mother. After this incident, the Lord started for Puri. leaving all the residents of Navadvipa in an ocean of lamentation over his separation.
Everyone was very, very sad when Lord Chaitanya took sannyas because he left Navadvip. He was like how Krishna is the darling of Vrindavan, Lord Chaitanya was the darling of Navadvip. Everyone was so attached to him, so attracted to him. They loved him so much, but now he's taken sannyas. He can't stay in Navadvip anymore. So they're all lamenting. And Mother Sachi, his mother, was crying, and he wanted to go to Vrindavan, but she's like, at least stay in Jagannath Puri. Like this, I'll get to hear news about you. There was a lot of pilgrims going from Navadvip and Jagannath Puri. There was a lot of uh, traffic between these two cities, these two dhams. And so she requested him to stay at Jagannath Puri. Prabhupada is pointing out that some unscrupulous people say that Lord Chaitanya also met his wife, but that's not true because the authorized sources on the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya don't mention that. Because a sannyasi, after he's taken sannyas, he's not supposed to meet his wife. No. So he did not.
The Lord visited many important places on the way to Puri. He visited the temple of Gopinathji, who had stolen condensed milk for his devotee Sri La Madhavendra Puri. Since then, deity Gopinathji is well known as Shirachora Gopinath. The Lord relished this story with great pleasure. The propensity of stealing is there even in the absolute consciousness, but because this propensity is exhibited by the absolute, it loses its perverted nature and thus becomes worshipable even by Lord Chaitanya on the basis of the absolute consideration that the Lord and his stealing propensity are one and identical. This interesting story of Gopinathji is vividly explained in the Caitaniya Caritamita by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami.
So the Lord's taking sannyas, that pastime is very detailed explained in Vrindavan Das Thakur's book, Caitanya Bhagavat. And after sannyas, when Lord was going to from Shantipur, he was going to Jagannath Puri because now he's going to stay in Jagannath Puri. So he came to a place called Remona. And in Remona, there is a temple of Gopinath. And this temple of Gopinath is famous as Kheer Gopinath because this deity Gopinath had stolen kheer for his devotee Madhavendra Puri. It's a beautiful pastime where Madhavendra Puri was visiting Gopinath temple, and Gopinath would always be offered 12 pots of kheer. And Madhavendra Puri got a thought in his mind that, oh, it will be so nice if I could taste this kheer so that I could offer it to my deity Gopal. Madhavendra Puri was taking care of Gopal deity in Vrindavan. So he got this thought in mind to taste this kheer of Gopinath, not for himself, not that, oh, I'll be so happy, but so that he could prepare it for Gopal. But he felt, oh my God, how could I even think of such a thing? I shouldn't have thought this is Gopinath's kheer. How am I thinking of uh, tasting it? So he left the temple. And then in the night, Gopinath came in the dream of the pujari who was taking care of Gopinath, and he told him, you offered me 12 pots of kheer, but when you took them away, I have hidden one pot. You see, it's there behind me. The deity came to the pujari and spoke to him. And he said, I have stolen this pot for my devotee Madhavendra Puri. You go give it to him. And then the pujari immediately got up, took shower, went to see the deity, and really there was one pot over there. Then he went to the village center and said, who is the Madhavendra Puri? Gopinath has stolen this kheer for you. And Madhavendra Puri then came forward that I'm Madhavendra Puri. And then he left the village very fast. Ramuna, he left because he said, oh my God, everybody will come to me because they'll want to honor me that, oh, Gopinath has stolen the kheer for me. So he left. He didn't want people and fame like that. He's a pure devotee of the Lord. So he left that place. But we can see that Krishna, he stole the kheer for his devotee. So Krishna steals also. But when Krishna is stealing, everyone is praising. It's because it's absolute. Krishna is stealing out of love for his devotee. So his stealing also becomes glorious. Everything is there in the absolute truth. There is nothing missing in the absolute truth. Because if it is missing, then he will not be called the complete whole. So the stealing propensity is also there. We cannot say, oh, we have this propensity to steal and God does not, because then we will become greater than God. God has everything, everything, even the stealing propensity is there. But because it is absolute, it is worshipable. Mhm. So this pastime shows that it becomes, in fact, it brings ecstasy in people when they hear this story that, oh my God, that Krishna loves his devotees so much that he's stealing for his devotee. Did anyone have any comments? Anything to add?
After visiting the temple of Shirachora Gopinath of Remuna at Balashore in Orissa, the Lord proceeded towards Puri and on the way visited the temple of Sakshi Gopal, who appeared as a witness in the matter of two Brahmana devotees' family quarrel. The Lord heard the story of Sakshi Gopal with great pleasure because he wanted to impress upon the atheist that the worshipable deities in the temples approved by the great acharyas are not idols as alleged by men with a poor fund of knowledge. The deity in the temple is the arch incarnation or personality of Godhead, and thus the deity is identical with the Lord in all respects. He responds to the proportion of devotees' affection for him. In the story of Sakshi Gopal, in which there was a family misunderstanding by two devotees of the Lord, in order to mitigate the turmoil as well as to show specific favor to his servitors, traveled from Vrindavan to Vidyanagara, a village in the Orissa, in the form of his Archa incarnation. From there, the deity was brought to Cuttack, and thus the temple of Sakshi Gopal is even today visited by thousands of pilgrims on the way to Jagannath Puri. The Lord stayed overnight there and began to proceed towards Puri. On the way, his sannyas rod was broken by Nityanand Prabhu. The Lord became apparently angry with him about this and went alone to Puri, leaving his companions behind.
So after he visited Kirchor Gopinath, Lord Chaitanya went to visit the deity of Sakshi Gopal to show that the deity is not an ordinary idol, it's the Lord himself. That Sakshi Gopal deity, he he walked, the deity walked from Vrindavan all the way to Vidyanagar because he was a witness between two Brahmanas. So the deity came from Vrindavan to Vidyanagar to bear the witness when there was dispute between two Brahmanas. So it goes to show that the deity is the Supreme Lord himself. Lord Chaitanya wanted to impress upon us this. And then, of course, after that, on the way to Puri, Lord Nityananda broke the sannyas rod of Lord Chaitanya. And because there are different reasons that Lord Nityananda said to Lord Chaitanya, you're the Lord of the full world. Why do you have to take this sannyas rod? You don't need this. And also he broke it into three because Lord Chaitanya had taken Ekadanda sannyas from the Shankaracharya Sampradaya. the Vaishnav sannyasis, they carry three dandas. Three dandas, because the vow is that, okay, I will serve the Lord with body, mind, and words. So that's why there are three sticks to remind of this. Three, that I will serve the Lord with body, mind, and words. So there's this kind of significance to this pastime. Of course, Lord Chaitanya became very upset with Lord Nityananda that why you broke my danda. And so he went first. He said, I'm going ahead to Puri. It's apparently it's pastimes of the Lord and his associates, you know. It's,
At Puri, when he entered the temple of Jagannath, he became at once saturated with transcendental ecstasy and fell down on the floor of the temple unconscious. The custodians of the temple could not understand the transcendental feats of the Lord, but there was a great learned Pandit named Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya who was present, and he could understand that the Lord's losing his consciousness upon entering the Jagannath temple was not an ordinary thing. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, who was the chief appointed Pandit in the court of the king of Orissa, Maharaj Prataparudra, was attracted by the youthful luster of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and could understand that such a transcendental trance was only rarely exhibited and only then by the topmost devotees who are already on the transcendental plane in complete forgetfulness of material existence. Only a liberated soul could show such a transcendental feat, and the Bhattacharya, who was vastly learned, could understand this in the light of transcendental literature with which he was familiar. He therefore asked the custodians of the temple not to disturb the unknown sannyasi. He asked them to take the Lord to his home so he could further observe in his unconscious state. The Lord was at once carried to the home of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, who at that time had sufficient power of authority due to his being the Sabha Pandit, or the state dean of faculty in Sanskrit literatures. The learned Pandit wanted to scrutinizingly test the transcendental feats of Lord Chaitanya because often unscrupulous devotees imitate physical feats in order to flaunt transcendental achievements just to attract innocent people and take advantage of them. A learned scholar like Bhattacharya can detect such impostors, and when he finds them out, he at once rejects them.
Lord Chaitanya, he apparently had gotten upset, right? So he left his associates and he went first to Jagannath Puri. And when he entered the temple, when he saw the Lord of his heart, he became so ecstatic in love that he fainted. So the guards of the temple, they were thinking that they didn't understand who Lord Chaitanya is and what is his position. So they were going to, pick him up and kind of take him out of the temple. But Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he was a great learned Pandit at that time, great scholar of the Vedanta Sutra. And he was the head pujari also. So he told them, no, instead you bring him to my house, because Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya could understand that this sannyasi does not seem to be an ordinary person, that how he's fainting when he's seeing the deity of Lord Jagannath. His body is having this kind of ecstatic transformation. So he understood that Lord Chaitanya doesn't seem to be a ordinary personality. He seems to be a great personality. So he told them, bring him to my house.
Hare Krishna, would anyone want to continue?
Yeah, I can read.
Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Next. In the case of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, The Bhattacharya tested all the symptoms in the light of the Shastras. He tested as a scientist, not as a foolish sentimentalist. He observed the movement of the stomach, beating of the heart, and the breathing of the nostrils. He also felt the pulse of the Lord and saw that all his bodily activities were in complete suspension. When he put a small cotton swab before the nostrils, he found that there was a slight breathing as the fine fibers of cotton moved slightly. Thus, he came to know that the Lord's unconscious trance was genuine, and he began to treat him in the prescribed fashion. But Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu could only be treated in a special way. He would respond only to the resounding of the holy names of the Lord by his devotees. This special treatment was unknown to Sarva Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya because the Lord was still unknown to him. When the Bhattacharya saw him for the first time in the temple, he simply took him to be one of many pilgrims.
So, like sometimes people just to get some worship from others, to get some fame from others, they imitate such a position of showing some ecstatic symptoms. There are eight kind of ecstatic symptoms, and then someone may imitate to just get some kind of fame and name, adoration, worship from others. But these things are not to be imitated. They're not. One who is a genuine devotee of the Lord automatically gets these symptoms. And if one imitates such things, then he'll just get name, fame, but he's not going to get love of God. That is what is the goal of life, love of God. So here, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is seeing, he's testing, is the Lord genuinely unconscious? Because he saw Jagannath, and out of his love for Jagannath, he's come in this state. So Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was testing his body movements, his breathing. Then he realized, yeah, he's really unconscious. Uh, he's not acting. And then he was trying to bring him out to consciousness. But because Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is not yet a devotee at this time, so he does not know how to bring Lord Chaitanya back to consciousness.
In the meantime, the companions of the Lord, who reached the temple a little after him, heard of the Lord's transcendental feats and of his being carried away by the Bhattacharya. The pilgrims at the temple were still gossiping about the incident, but by chance one of these pilgrims had met Gopinatha Acharya, who was known to Gadadhara Pandit, and from him it was learned that the Lord was lying in an unconscious state at the residence of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, who happened to be the brother-in-law of Gopinatha Acharya. All the members of the party were introduced by Gadadhara Pandita to Gopinath Acharya, who took them all to the house of Bhattacharya, where the Lord was lying unconscious in a spiritual trance. All the members then chanted loudly the holy name of the Lord Hari as usual, and the Lord regained his consciousness. After this, Bhattacharya received all the members of the party, including Lord Nityananda Prabhu, and asked him to become his guests of honor. The party, including the Lord, went for a bath in the sea, and the Bhattacharya arranged for their residence and meals at the house of Kashi Mishra. Gopinath Acharya, his brother-in-law, also assisted. There were some friendly talks about the Lord divinity between the two brother-in-law, and in this argument, Gopinath Acharya, who knew the Lord before, now tried to establish the Lord as the personality of Godhead, and the Bhattacharya tried to establish him as one of the great devotees. Both of them argued from the angle of vision of authentic Shastras, and not on the strength of sentimental vox populi. The incarnations of God are determined by authentic Shastras and not by popular votes of foolish fanatics. Because Lord Chaitanya was an incarnation of God, in fact, fanatics have proclaimed so many called incarnations of God in this age without referring to authentic scriptures. But Sarvabhauma Bhauma Bhattacharya or Gopinath Acharya did not indulge in such foolish sentimentalism. On the contrary, both of them tried to establish or reject his divinity on the strength of authentic Shastras.
So now Lord Chaitanya is unconscious in the house of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. In the meantime, his party, the devotees he was traveling with, they also caught up. They also came to the temple of Puri. And they heard that, oh, there was a young sannyasi who just fainted, and they've taken him to Bhattacharya's house, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's house. So, because it's like not a common thing, this very rare thing you see like that. So then they were thinking now what to do. And Gadadhar Pandit, who was there, one of the traveling party, he knew Gopinath Acharya. Gopinath Acharya is the brother-in-law of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And Gopinath Acharya is a devotee of the Lord. He's a great devotee. So he takes them to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's house. And over there, the devotees, they chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. They have very, very great kirtan over there. And hearing the kirtan, the Lord woke up. He broke his, he came back to his consciousness. Then Bhattacharya, he invited everyone, the Lord and his other devotees who were traveling with him. He said, please have lunch with me. So they all went to bathe in the Ganga, and then they accepted it. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya made arrangements for them all to stay in the house of Kashi Mishra. And so now Gopinath Acharya, he is telling Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. He's the absolute truth himself. He is God himself. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's viewpoint is that no, he's not God, but he's a great devotee. So they're not talking, oh, because this one is saying that, or so many other people are saying that. No, they are having this discussion based on evidence in the scriptures. Based from the scriptures, they are quoting and having this discussion. Because someone may say, oh, somebody is an incarnation of God. Why? Just because I think so, and because such and such people think so, or such and such people of this village or city think so. But that's not the way to discuss. The way to discuss is from evidence of the scriptures. Which scriptures are stating it? Are they revealed scriptures? Are they the authentic scriptures? So, um, because in the age of Kali, there's so many people proclaiming that they're incarnations of God. But we have to test on the basis of scripture. There has to be scriptural evidence coming from the revealed scriptures.
Later, it was disclosed that Bhattacharya also came from the Nava, Navadvipa area, and it was understood from him that Nilambara Chakravarti, the maternal grandfather of Lord Chaitanya, happened to be a class fellow of the father of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. In that sense, the young sannyasi Lord Chaitanya evoked paternal affection from Bhattacharya. Bhattacharya was the professor of many sannyasis in the order of the Shankaracharya Sampradaya, and he himself also belonged to that cult. As such, the Bhattacharya desired that the young sannyasi Lord Chaitanya also hear from him about the teachings of Vedanta.
Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he understood that, oh, Lord Chaitanya is from Navadvip, he's the grandson of Nilambar Chakravarti. Nilambar Chakravarti was classmate of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's father, who was also from Navadvip. So Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya got, he said, oh, he's like, a friend of my, he's the grandson of my father's friend. So he got affectionate towards him. He wanted to teach him Vedanta Sutra. Bhattacharya was coming in the line of Shankaracharya. And so he told Lord Chaitanya, I'm going to teach you Vedanta Sutra now.
Those who are the followers of the Shankara cult are generally known as Vedantists. This does not, however, mean that Vedanta is a monopoly study of the Shankara Sampradaya. Vedanta is studied by all the bona fide Sampradayas, but they have their own interpretations. But those in the Shankara Sampradaya are generally known to be ignorant of the knowledge of the Vedantist Vaishnavas. For this reason, the Bhakti Vedanta title was first offered to the author by the Vaishnavas.
So it's not that Vedanta is only studied by the Shankaracharya sect. No, even the Vaishnavas study Vedanta. Bhagavatam is the essence of the Vedanta Sutra. We're going to hear. It's because it's just that Shankaracharya's explanation of Vedanta, it became popular. But it doesn't mean that the Vaishnavas don't have their explanation of the Vedanta.
Anybody else wants to continue?
I'll read.
Yeah, please, yeah, sure.
Yeah, thank Krishna. The Lord agreed to take lessons from Bhattacharya on the Vedanta, and they sat together in the temple of Lord Jagannath. The Bhattacharya went on speaking continually for 7 days, and the Lord heard him with all attention and did not interrupt. The Lord's silence raised some doubts in Bhattacharya's heart, and he asked the Lord how it was that he did not ask anything or comment on his explanations of Vedanta.
So Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya told Lord Chaitanya, I'm going to teach you Vedanta. And so he's speaking on Vedanta. 7 days he's speaking, and the Lord is just sitting there and listening. So then uh, Bhattacharya is saying, are you have no questions, you have no comments? Are you able to understand what I'm telling you? Or, there's no reaction from you at all. What's happening?
The Lord posed himself before the Bhattacharya as a foolish student and pretended that he heard the Vedanta from him because the Bhattacharya felt that this was the duty of a sannyasi. But the Lord did not agree with his lectures. By this, the Lord indicated that the so-called Vedantists amongst the Shankara Sampradaya or any other Sampradaya who do not follow the instructions of Srila Vyasadeva are mechanical students of the Vedanta. They are not fully aware of the great knowledge. The explanation of the Vedanta Sutra is given by the author himself in the text of Srimad Bhagavatam. One who has no knowledge of the Bhagavatam will hardly be able to know what the Vedanta says.
So Lord Chaitanya, he was hearing the Vedanta, but because Bhattacharya felt that, that Lord Chaitanya should study. He's a sannyasi, so he should study. But when he asked him, um, okay, now that's in the later. So here Prabhupada is pointing out that the meaning of the Vedanta, Srila Vyasadeva has put it in Srimad Bhagavatam. That is the real way of understanding Vedanta, by studying the Bhagavatam, because Bhagavatam is a natural commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. The Vedanta Sutra is written by Vyasadeva. Vedanta Sutra is very difficult for people of Kali Yuga to understand. And the way to understand Vedanta Sutra is to hear Srimad Bhagavatam, study Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a commentary by Srila Vyasadeva. It's a explanation of the Vedanta Sutra, also written by Srila Vyasadeva. That is the real way. So Srila Prabhupada points out that because people think that the Vaishnavas don't study the Vedanta. But no, Vaishnavas also study the Vedanta Sutra. They have the commentary of the Vedanta Sutra. And Prabhupada is saying this is how he's been given the title Bhakti Vedanta. Srila Prabhupada's name is A.C. Bhakti Vedanta, right? Means he studied the Vedanta.
The Bhattacharya, being a vastly learned man, could follow the Lord's sarcastic remarks on the popular Vedantists. He therefore asked him why he did not ask about any point which he could not follow. The Bhattacharya could understand the purpose of his dead silence for the days he heard him. This showed clearly that the Lord had something else in mind. Thus, the Bhattacharya requested him to disclose his mind.
Bhattacharya saying, you heard me, but you didn't say anything. What's the reason? What happened?
Upon this, the Lord spoke as follows: My dear sir, I can understand the meaning of the sutras like Jadmadi Asya Yata, Shastra Yonitvat, and Athato Brahma Jignasa of the Vedanta Sutra. But when you explain them in your own way, it becomes difficult for me to follow them. The purpose of the sutras is already explained in them, but your explanations are covering them with something else. You do not purposely take the direct meaning of the sutras by indirectly giving your own interpretations.
Lord Chaitanya is saying, I very well understand the original meaning, Vedanta Sutra, Janmadhyasya Yata, Athato Brahma Jigyasa, Shastra Yonitvat. He's saying, I understand. The meaning is very clear and direct of the sutras. But what you are doing is, you are changing the meaning of it. And that is what I cannot understand. You are misinterpreting the Vedanta Sutra. And that is what I don't understand. He's saying the meaning of the Vedanta Sutra is clear in the Vedanta Sutra itself. But your explanation, you're covering the meaning, you're covering the original meaning, and you're giving your own interpretation.
I didn't understand that line. What is that? Janmadi as.
It's
What
the
does it
first
mean?
is the Vedanta Sutra begins with this, and then
Oh,
the Bhagavatam also begins with that Janmadi Asya Yata, that the everything is coming from the truth. These are the sutras of the Vedanta.
oh. And then Shastra Yoni, what?
This I'm not sure what it means. But Athato Brahma Jigyasa means that now that we have the human life, let's begin into the inquiry of the absolute truth to the Supreme Lord. So these are the sutras. And the direct meaning is there. But what Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was doing, he's confusing the meaning. He's covering up the real meaning and giving his imagination.
The Lord thus attacked all Vedantists who interpret the Vedanta Sutra fashionably, according to their limited power of thinking to serve their own purpose. Such indirect interpretations of the authentic literatures, like the Vedanta Sutra, are hereby condemned by the Lord.
What Lord Chaitanya's point was that don't misinterpret the Vedas. The Vedanta Sutra is there by Srila Vyasadeva. The Bhagavatam is there by Srila Vyasadeva. Bhagavatam is the natural commentary of the Vedanta Sutra. But there are some people who misinterpret the Vedanta Sutra. And this is what Lord is saying. Don't do that. Don't misinterpret. Take the direct meaning. Because the author knows how to explain what he has written. The author is Srila Vyasadeva and of the Vedanta Sutra. And he has said that I'm explaining the Vedanta Sutra in Srimad Bhagavatam. So study the Bhagavatam to understand the Vedanta Sutra. So Lord Chaitanya is saying, why you're not taking the direct meaning? Why you're indirectly taking? Why you're misinterpreting? This is the point of Lord Chaitanya.
The Lord continued, Srila Vyasadeva has summarized the direct meanings of the mantras in the Upanishads in the Vedanta Sutra. Unfortunately, you do not take their direct meaning, you indirectly interpret them in a different way. The authority of the Vedas is unchallengeable and stands without any question of doubt. And whatever is stated in the Vedas must be accepted completely. Otherwise, one challenges the authority of the Vedas.
So Lord Chaitanya is saying, accept the Vedas as it is. Don't make some different meaning out of it. Oh, this one should mean this and that one should mean that. No, just accept what is there.
The conch shell and cow dung are bone and stool of two living beings. But because they have been recommended by the Vedas as pure, people accept them as such because of the authority of the Vedas.
Because stool and bone are impure, but Vedas are saying that conch shell and cow dung are pure. So we accept because it's Vedic injunction.
The idea is that one cannot set his imperfect reason above the authority of the Vedas. The orders of the Vedas must be obeyed as they stand, without any mundane reasoning. The so-called followers of the Vedic injunctions make their own interpretations of the Vedic injunctions, and thus they establish different parties and sects of the Vedic religion. Lord Buddha directly denied the authority of the Vedas and he established his own religion. Only for this reason, the Buddhist religion was not accepted by the strict followers of the Vedas. But those who are so called followers of the Vedas are more harmful than the Buddhists. The Buddhists have the courage to deny the Vedas directly, but the so called followers of the Vedas have no courage to deny the Vedas, although indirectly they disobey all the injunctions of the Vedas. Lord Chaitanya condemned this.
So the Vedas are spoken by the Supreme Lord Himself. And that's the reason they are beyond any interpretation. And that's why they should be accepted as they are. Now, Lord Buddha, he denied authority of Vedas, because people were misusing the Vedas at that time, misusing for their own personal sense gratification. So he said, don't follow the Vedas. And that's why those who are really the follower of the Vedas, they don't accept Buddhist religion, because Buddhist religion is not a Vedic religion. Religion has to be based on Vedas, word of God. But Vedas are spoken by God himself. And so then Lord Chaitanya is pointing out that there are people who are saying they are followers of Vedas, but they're misinterpreting the Vedas. They're not accepting Vedas as they are, but saying, oh, this thing means this, and this thing should mean this, and this thing means that. No, just accept as they are, because by putting own interpretation, they are not saying, oh, we are not following the Vedas, but actually they're not following. So they become more harmful, like pretending to follow it, but completely distorting the meaning of the Vedas. And so Lord Chaitanya is unhappy about that. He's saying, no, this should not be done.
The examples given by the Lord of the conch shell and the cow dung are very much appropriate in this connection. If one argues that since cow dung is pure, the stool of a learned Brahmana is still more pure, his argument will not be accepted. Cow dung is accepted, and the stool of a highly posted Brahmana is rejected. The Lord continued.
Makes sense? Because Vedas is saying that stool is impure, but stool of cow dung is very pure. This is Vedic injunction. But now one may say, but Brahmana, he is even more pure than cow. So the stool of the Brahmana should be more pure than cow. One can misinterpret it, but that is wrong, no? It's not that the stool of a pure Brahmana is pure. No, only cow dung is pure. So Lord Chaitanya is saying, don't misinterpret the Vedas. So we'll have to stop here today, though. We can continue tomorrow.
Yes.
Did anyone have any comments?
No, good.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening in and joining in, and all your participation. Shla Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Hare Krishna.